Well, thank you. So first off, I am Dan Green's much younger brother. People ask who's older. I'm like, he left for college when I was in kindergarten. So there's that. Well, thank you very much. So we had a theologian speak, Todd. I also teach adjunct at Urbana Theological Seminary. We had my brother, a counselor, speak, and now I'm coming from a technologist point of view. So while I'm going to say a lot of kind of negative things, I'm actually very bullish in AI. I really like it. I did postdoc at Marquette in machine learning and AI. So while I will say a lot of things of concern, that's not really where I'm coming from. So last fall, I spoke at a conference for sociology professors across the state, and here was my topic. Like, I'm not a sociology researcher, I don't really know what y'all do, but here's some things I would be checking out if I were you. It went over really, really well. I'm kind of doing a similar presentation, even though I am a Christian and I did go to seminary, but I didn't get an MDiv. That's like the hardest degree there is. I could never learn another language, a human language. But I'm going to say a lot of things about AI, and different ones will say different things to you, but I'm coming from the point of a technologist. And also, though, I have a big hobby and interest in technology history for thousands of years. Partly because my dad was a pioneer in computer programming, going from the late 50s for over 50 years, bringing a language called COBOL to a company called Caterpillar Tractors. When his 50th anniversary, the president of Caterpillar said, "This is the pioneer." So that's how I grew up. That's what I'm used to. And you know what? Mankind has wanted machines to do their work for thousands of years. It's just, we've always wanted. Now, let me use two different terms. A tool is something that helps us do our work. A machine does our work for us. And the Smiths, that were the tech bros for thousands of years until recently, the cool kids, the Smiths in Greek mythology, he made a bunch of golden maidens to do his work. I can't even pronounce that name. He also made a robot, they call it an automatron, to guard a city. Now this is a story of a smith in Finnish mythology who made a golden bride because his wife died in childbirth and he wanted a bride that would not die on him. At the end of the story, on his deathbed, he tells the other smiths, "Don't make a wife out of metal. She'll be cold and she'll never love you." Which reminds me a lot of Dan's talk last week. These are not new concerns. This is where we've been for a long time. The word robota, comes from where my brother is right now, Czech. It was a play in 1921, and it is Slavic for slave. We, as humans, have wanted someone else to do our work. In many ways, we want to alleviate the pain from the fall. Death and childbirth, that's why the Finnish smith made the golden maiden. Work, toil for our food. And it's not necessarily bad, or I wouldn't have spent a life becoming a technologist and figuring out how to make life better. But there are guardrails and concerns related to trying to alleviate the pain of our fall. So this is my quote. This is how I view it. God made his children out of dirt. Mankind's made their children out of sand. Silicon's made of sand. That's what I'm getting at. Now, I'm not using scripture quite right here, but neither did Paul. So I'm not finding seminary ways to use scripture, but when I read about some stuff, I just think about the verses of building your house on sand. And we are building our house, our culture on this. Now, some of the newer ideas is maybe we'll make computers out of diamonds because, putting all our faith in riches is better. But either way, that's where we are, and I'm going to demonstrate and it will describe, probably more than anything, all the ways that we are putting our faith in sand. One of my primary concerns is, there's verses that says divination is a sin, prophecies that are not from God are a sin. Yet, AI primarily is a predictor. And we use those predictions every day. Your weather maps, or your weather, climate Our understanding of greenhouse gases' relationship to our climate comes from models. Models is another term for AI. Everything we understand, not everything, the vast majority of what we understand about climate comes from AI. The predictions on weather come from AI. Google Maps comes from AI, and that is prediction. That is predicting the best way for you to get there. And more current versions of GPS change the route as you're driving, making different predictions. Even the generative AI that's caught people's attention, even though AI is quite old, is a prediction machine. It writes one word at a time, predicting the best word for your request. It is based on predictions. So there's concerns here, but there's also going both directions. How do we navigate our lives in a world where predictions are very accurate? The weather, they go hour per hour, and it's a lot better than it was a few years ago. And they are telling you the temperature hour per hour, and especially the days that don't fluctuate. In Wisconsin, if it was 20 and they say it's gonna be 60, it might go up to 70 or 80. But the days that are close, they're right every hour. So when we know predictions that are 90% likely to be accurate, how do you use that information? It's interesting. It's one that's really concerning to the world that I'm part of is using predictions of someone recommitting a crime in sentencing. So we have 90% pretty sure this person is more likely to commit a crime, so we might as well put them in jail longer. That's a whole thing. Books are written on it. They are accurate, but are they fair? But also, is it right to ignore a prediction when when they said, hey, there's gonna be a hurricane, it's coming, you really need to board it up? It would be wrong to ignore that prediction. So, above my pay grade on really what to do with that, just one of the things I want to identify and one of my biggest concerns. But if I were to put my concerns in one word, it's this one. Good, they got it. Everything in its place. Focus on what matters. We do not want to put our faith in the sand too much, or at all, not faith. So things to be careful. So as I describe AI, and I'm going to get a little more technical in a minute, this is one of the main things I want to watch out for. What are we really trusting? God's still in control. He has plans, there's providence. How do we balance that? God is God. We are not. Neither are our children, nor our machines. Let's keep that in mind, and I'm going to dive into what AI really is. Because I actually hate the most common definition for AI as a technologist. Most definitions of AI use the word human cognition in there, and I hate it. And here's why. As a technologist, I find that extremely limiting. If I were to make a robot to hunt mice, don't limit to humans. I want it to think like a cat. But wait, I can make it think like a human. I want to think like both. Actually, I just want to make a machine that hunts mice as best as any way I can figure out. Human cognition, cat cognition, all's in there, so is anything else. One thing about AI that most people miss is it learns from data, but a lot of the data is trial and error. So if I made a robot to hunt mice, I'd put everything I know about cats, everything I know about humans, and I'd say, you hunt mice until you got it mastered, and it would learn on its own through trial and error. So that's one thing that's missing. A lot of the data that they use in AI is its own trial and error, and it can try things millions of times very quickly. So if you have a fleet of cars learning to drive, as humans, each of us make our own mistakes, and we have to learn from it. And when a 16-year-older gets a license, we start over. A fleet of cars, every mistake, the whole fleet knows it. It's very, very different. All right, so, I didn't go to that side. So I want to share very briefly what happens in the lab. How do we build AI? I think it helps to understand what it really is. So I'm going to start off with the most basic form of where does this come from? How does the machine think? It's the linear regression. Okay, so what does that mean? So I have a chart, and I'm going to look at the square feet of a house and the price. I'm going to plot them on a map, on a graph. And then I'll draw a line down the middle. That's called a linear regression. It's like, okay, it's a 2,000 square foot house, and if you look, most of those are around 300,000. And then I can predict either way. Said, oh, you bought a house for 300,000? I bet it's 2,000 square feet. That's a linear regression, way predates AI, just a thing that statisticians have been using for a long time. It is AI though, if you write a linear regression and you put it in a program and that's how it thinks. Making the linear regression, computers help, but it existed long before computers. But there's something called logistic regression, which you can't do on paper, and I wrote one with 12 variables. You give me 11, I'll give you the answer to the other one, 90+% accurate. That you can't do on paper and pencil. My computer could hardly do it. It about turned off the lights. But, so building that model was AI, and using that model was AI. So for linear regression, building it is just an old statistical trick. Using it in a computer program is AI. But the more advanced algorithms, building it and using it are both AI. So here's another one, an old thing. Decision trees. In medicine, you call them protocols. Now, early AI was just, you asked humans to build these trees, we put them in a computer program. That's early AI. Now, there are great algorithms that looks at the data and said, oh, I can make predictions with decision trees that the AI built. And then the data scientist looks at the results and says, let's tweak it. Because sometimes you want to err one way or the other. So what would be an example of that? If I were to make a model to predict if someone has a very rare disease, 1 out of 1,000, I could tell you how to be 99.99% accurate. Just say nobody has it. Model's done, didn't take me long at all. It's a worthless model, right? So if I were to make that prediction, I would want to say, I'll identify about 1% of the population that needs to research, check more, but never miss anybody. But then in other things, we don't want to err only one direction. So that's where the humans get involved. Another thing AI is fantastic at is just look at the data and make the groupings. It's big in marketing. It's how vision works. It's how MRIs and X-rays are read. AI is fantastic at that. Building it is an AI. Using it is an AI. And now we have our neural networks. That's where we're at. Now, neural networks is where the stuff that's got our attention came from. These are much more complex algorithms. I wrote an algorithm that was a decision tree and a logistic regression against 12 variables, and it took about an hour to run. On the same Mac, I wrote a neural network for it, and it took 4 days. I didn't even get to touch my computer for 4 days to run it. Now, that's why we're having huge data centers that need their own nuclear reactors to build robust neural networks. Now, the neural networks are algorithms based on our understanding of human neurophysiology 50 years ago. Not our understanding of it now. Our understanding of it now is, it's just so complex. It's kind of a shortcut. It's kind of a cheat. It might be the best we can do with silicon. Pretty amazing what it does. But just wanted to throw that term out so you've heard it and you kind of understand where it fits. We divide AI into 3 categories. Vision, which I hate that term because it's really all sensors. Predictive analytics, which is most things. And natural language processing, which is what we're used to with ChatGPT and the digital assistants. And we force all the applications of AI into one of these 3 when we talk about AI, just so you know. Little history of AI, it's old, older than me. 1956 is when the term came from. There was a conference, they thought they could build something like ChatGPT that summer, took whatever number of years it was to get there. But they also thought they could do it by asking humans a bunch of questions and then having all the answers very explicitly in code. Well, in the 90s, that doesn't work. We need to have programs that look at the data and then write other programs. So here's what happened then. Programmers took themselves out of the business of making the machines know the answers. What we did is we went from building the AIs to building the incubators that domain experts and data scientists grow the AIs in. So different versions of ChatGPT, there may not be any new code. It is experts in their fields, psychologists, physiologists, English professors. They're the ones who are feeding different data to the systems, the incubator that the programmers wrote. So programmers aren't really doing We will build the incubators for the AIs, and then we will take those AIs and put them in our programs, but we are not building the AIs anymore. That is, they're called domain experts, data scientists. Let's make sure. What about robots? Well, if a robot makes decisions, that's AI. If a robot is just an arm doing that, or like a door for, no, that's not AI. So if a robot's showing that can kind of think, it is AI. But the robot's the physical tool that the AI is the brains for. They are separate topics, but barely. We are, oh, how did I get in? All right, so my point here is these three terms are synonyms for AI. Not all simulations are AI. So if there's a simulation where I can go and experience something like, hey, I didn't get to go on a vacation, so I'll go on a simulation, that's not AI, even though probably there's some AI to make it better. So video games that are simulations aren't, but if you're gonna build a model and run it and see how it turns out, like climate models, that's AI. So simulations are usually an algorithm for AI, but not always. The term algorithm, any algorithm written in the last 50 years in computer programming would be AI. The older ones aren't, but the ones in the last 50 years, those are all AI. So when they talk about the algorithm in your news feed, that's 100% AI. And then the word model, statistical models that are applied, then it's AI. So all those terms are synonyms for AI. Now, how are we dependent? Everywhere. And we have been for 50 years. Healthcare, we talked about it before. Radiology is great. Diagnostics is great. Pharmaceutical, there's two main reasons. So when COVID came out, they said, hey, there won't be immunization for 6 years, and then 9 months later it came out. Two things happened. One, RNA technology was sitting and waiting for it because we were already fighting coronaviruses with that. Two, they did do AI simulations and work, and I do know a chemist at the lab that made the one that starts with an M, and he's like, oh, AI was all over that. He said it probably took 2 years out of the process. So there's a lot of other areas. Public policy planning, when statisticians come up and say, here's what the jobs are gonna be, or here's where we need to move the economy, that's all AI. Navigation, I already said that. Personal recommendations, one of my biggest concerns. Very few humans choose what we read anymore. Now, I take my students and everybody go to CNN.com on your computer and everybody gets different articles. It's being fed what they think you'll click. Now, if you go to Google News, it'll rewrite the titles of the stories for you. They have the Google written. They are feeding you what they think they can sell you. All AI. This is another concern. Peter Thiel is going to universities talking about the Antichrist. And he's a transhumanist. Elon Musk is a transhumanist. There's a new version of humanism that believes that technology is the next phase of human evolution. A lot of decisions made in Silicon Valley, the richest part of the world, are based on this belief set. It's pervasive, and it includes both direct technology, but also genetic, gene, CRISPR therapy. There's lots of things. I'm not saying it's all bad, but the belief, there is some people who really believe, they call themselves Christians, but they believe salvation is through the technology that God gave us. And there are people who really believe and are putting billions into it that they can live forever if they build a machine to go into. I have lots of thoughts on that. The theologian that spoke 2 weeks ago has actually written on that topic, published in that topic. It's a really perversion of our faith, a significant perversion of our faith, and it's really quite sad. But the desire and the fear of death and the desire to live forever and the misunderstanding of who God is and who we are is pervasive in Silicon Valley, and the decisions being made and where the money will be going in a lot of things. I get asked this all the time. Can AI gain consciousness of being sentient? Like, well, no, they're made of sand. They're things we built. That being said, they're designed to be indistinguishable. And that's still tricky. So we won't be able to tell. Now, my brother was here and he was demonstrating an AI. He said, here's the things that are different than humans. But that is by design. AI, that part of AI, is a product. So I had a buddy who was a chef for a pizza. I wasn't going to say the name, but I did. Okay. And I once complimented him on, I think it was Philadelphia cheesesteak. Like, oh, I loved your pizza. It's so good. He's like, oh, Matt, you should have tasted the original. Like, that was a problem you could easily have solved either way. Like, what? He's like, oh, I spent like 20 to 30 bucks. I make this great pizza. Everybody loves it. And then another chef in marketing figures out how to make it for $4. So we could sell it for 7 to 10. Like, oh, and that's the way AI works. So there are hundreds of psychologists for each of those, cognitive psychologists, industrial psychologists, a lot of cognitive, and then the regular, who can build an AI that's just like a human. They build it. Then they have other ones like, yeah, that'll never sell. Humans are awful. We don't like each other. Who wants a AI that's going to nag you or tell you you're wrong? So there's other humans taking it from that $20 pizza to a $4 pizza. The things that we criticize the AI can all be fixed, but we don't want that. Does that make sense? So that is, AI is a product and it has the pluses and minuses of that. And if something's free, then we're the product. They're buying our attention. This is scary. This is only a month old. This is a social media for AI to talk to each other. So if I were to build an AI agent, which means I use AI to build something that does something, and it hits a roadblock, it'll go here and say, hey, other AIs, can you help me with this? And they help each other out. They also talk about politics and humans. And if you log on to here, you can't contribute. Only software can, and I could write a program where I could contribute, but only programs can contribute to this. So it has to look like a program, but humans get to monitor it. And so, I don't know, I'm not too concerned except for they're organizing. They're trying to make some unions and guilds, they call them guilds. And who knows? But I'll probably prevent it from getting too effective. This is only a month old. We don't know if this is just something kind of weird or the future. And the people that built it don't know. The people monitoring don't know. But it is where AI is. They're talking to each other. Now, that's the thing we did by design. We make things called adversarial networks where you make one AI build something, another one criticize it so that they can work together to build something good, and you have them adversarial. So this is not new. Okay. Now, when I talk about AI, I'm actually more concerned about the automation of everything. So the term is from the late 50s, about the same time as AI, called cybernetics. That's where cyber comes from. And that is a loop of automation. So the early example is the Honeywell thermostat. So before that, which I wasn't around, I never lived in a house without a thermostat, but you open the windows, you close the windows, you throw cool in the fire, you don't have coal in the fire. For radiant heat, you turn it up and down. But humans had to do a lot of work. So they built the thermostat to say, just keep it here and don't tell me how you did it. That's automation. That's the cybernetic loop. And AI is doing this. So some people in AI ethicist world will say, we need to put humans in the middle. Like sometimes I don't want to be in the middle of that. And there's a lot of things I don't want to be in the middle of. But other things we got to be in the middle of. So there needs to be a lot of wisdom of when does a human need to be, it's called humans in the loop. When does a human need to be there? When humans don't need to be there. Does that make sense? So like job selection. There's a lot of controversy on that. Like, okay, I got 10,000 resumes, I'll let AI choose which ones I look at. Like, is that good or bad? I sat next to recruiters for 10 years in a previous job. It does it the same way a human does it. It's based on keywords. Before that, they just had to search. The AI's better than the search was, so there's that. But, so some of the things I'm gonna talk about isn't just AI, but it's the automation of everything, or I call it the cult of optimization. We got to be efficient at everything. Everything's got to be more efficient, and it is definitely an ethic. And I do think waste can be unethical, but the cult of optimization is, to me, a bit of a concern. Okay, now I'm going to jump into specific. Hopefully, I've explained what AI and give you a slightly different angle to look at it. Some of the things I want to look at. Just describe, and I'll do this fairly quickly. Here are the different categories of human implications of this automated world that we are living in. One is mistakes and bias in AI. Absolutely, it can make a mistake. The issue I have with this is that's talked about a lot, and rarely is it worse than humans. So yes, there are mistakes, but they're fixable. So recruiters might be biased, but I mean, the AI picking resumes might have biases, but I can tell it to be biased in different ways. Humans are harder to train. So while these are 100% true, they are actually somewhat fixable. The Social Dilemma by Netflix is a fantastic documentary on how algorithms choose what we read and how they've used psychologists from Vegas to figure out how to get us addicted to stuff. Both Google feed, Facebook feed, they actually studied addiction to make the product. And so we could talk later. There's a lot of books, but those are some of the better ones. And Weapons of Math Destruction is a game changer. It's quoted all the time. Well, we heard the first week about property, PI being stolen in our author. That's definitely a thing. There's also concern of employers, like, hey, you throw in a business case and you want it to say, here's the summary, but then we gave everybody else the information. There's concerns, there's solutions, but there's definitely concerns. Job displacement. All right, here we go. Remember I said the Smiths were the cool kids? That's my great-grandpa's blacksmith shop, okay? And he shoed horses. That's his car dealership 10 years later because shoeing horses just weren't as cool or as useful. So he was able to adjust. There's my other great-grandpa. That's a trolley in Peoria, Illinois. They got rid of trolleys in Peoria, Illinois. I asked my cousins. No one knows what he did after that. There's different ways. Technology is always taking jobs. That's why we make technology. And it's always taking artist jobs because that's what about the artists? Like, how many of your plates and bowls were made on a potter's wheel? How many of your clothes were hand? No, seamstress is art too. Pottery is art. Technology is always taking jobs. I will acknowledge this is on steroids. This is much more than ever before, and scarier than ever before. But it has always been there. There's a lot of concerns about AI and the climate and our system, but there's actually a lot of people trying to work in climate. They're using AI to come up with the solutions too. They talk about how much resources data centers take, but there's also research on it taking less energy use. One of the things e-waste I think is really quite, what are we gonna do with all this silicon and lithium? And there's a lot of concerns here. There's also quite a few of the solutions there. Abundance. There's a lot of concerns that if a few AIs do all the work and the people own it, how does one person have a house, another person an apartment if neither of us are doing the work? It is disruptive in a way that we've never experienced. We've had disruptive technology before. This is new, this is more. So there is a lot of questions like, well, what is this world gonna look like? There are a lot of concerns there. Alignment is the term we use, like, is AI doing what we want it to? Like, if I were to ask a robot, clean my room, and then they threw everything away. Like, well, I guess it's clean. We actually train people to use AIs like an assistant, and it's called a digital assistant sometimes. You still tell them what to do. You still set, here's the goal, but you gotta be clear on the goal. And that is both the people in the labs building the AIs and the people using the AIs or the robots or whatever. There's different examples. A lot of alignment issues. Are we aligning our tools that are doing more and more of the thinking for us with what we really want or should be asking? This is such a true statement. Humans are becoming more like machines as machines become more like humans. So I told you, all these AIs have, frankly, hundreds of psychologists and whatnot to make them more like humans. Technology's always influenced our physiology. I mean, one of my grandpas was a dairy farmer. He was quite beefier than I am. I sit in my seat on a keyboard. We've always adjusted our cognitive skills. I think it's Plato, maybe it's Aristotle, was really concerned about written language because, like, well, people won't remember anything anymore. Technology's always changed humanity, and this is very, very much so, and we are becoming, because we're training people how to talk to machines. I mean, I do it in my job. And we are training the machines, so it's really weird, and I don't know where all that's gonna go. So now we're going to dive into faith concerns. And these, I'm putting them in these categories. Why do we believe what we believe? Why do we do what we do? The other ones. Oh. Why do we believe what we believe? Well, first of all, our news, very few of us have much control over what we read. It is being fed to us. It's called the attention economy, and it's very hard for us to really, I work pretty hard on the algorithms to make sure, like, if you see something that's kind of interesting, but you really don't want that being fed to you, just don't click on it. And there's a lot of little habits, but it's really hard. I mean, not many of us go to a paper library and only select books after looking at all of them. I mean, there is so much being fed to us. Deep fakes, oh my. Pretty soon it'll be very, very hard to trust a video as evidence. It's not there yet. That's next year. But it's coming. And if articles are being rewritten to match your taste, which is really where a lot of it's going, what do we believe? And there's also going to be a lot of false dogmas. A lot of people are just certain of things. Going to be coming up more and more. So here's my advice on these. You can look at the top bullet for all of them. What do we do? You can read that for a second. I would say part of your time alone with God needs to include an examination of what are you really believing in over and over again, more than ever before, because there's being more thrown at us than ever before. Other concerns. Why do we do what we do? Why do we work? So, not long ago, you worked to eat and and no one to speak of got to have jobs that satisfied them. That wasn't really a goal. That's a more common goal. But we live in a world where we're supposed to be satisfied by our jobs. What if that's not really what our job is? For those of you who want to know, my favorite movie about the warnings of AI is WALL-E. In that movie, those people have never walked, they do not eat, and they just are entertained. One of my favorite technologists is Neil Portman, I think it is, and he discussed entertaining ourselves to death, and that was in the 80s. It's much worse. Why do we make anything? I don't know why you would make an AI image, and these are mostly AI images, but why would you make an AI image and frame it? That's just unnecessary. Why even get out of bed? Things to consider. Should we reconsider the Sabbath? My answer is yes. Machines work 24/7. They just keep running. Humans should not try to match that. Also, on the other side, God worked for 6 days and then he rested. If we're going to entertain ourselves all for 6 days and then say we're resting, I think there's a balance there, and I think we need to look at both sides. So I think the concept of work and rest and being intentional needs to not be lost. And what are we really supposed to be doing? Because I think a lot of us have confused our vocation and our calling, and I think that needs to be refocused on, as our vocations will be very much disrupted. So I think those are two things I want to watch: is what is work, how do we work, and what is our calling, and why did he create us? What does he really want from us? Also, God made us to be in fellowship with him and each other. So while AI is a tool, that's not your relationships. Human embodied relationships, in person. I have relationships with some folks in Bangladesh, and I've never met them, and they're pretty personal. And once there was people outside his door going to burn down his house for being a Christian. You can have close relationships with people you've never met. Technology enables that. That's amazing. But those shouldn't be your only relationships. And there's a lot of stuff there. I'm not going to get into it. We need to strive to have human relationships that aren't tightly scheduled. More and more people's schedules are being run by AI. That's another thing to watch out for. And this is my last slide. We need to, because it's being challenged, really focus on what does it mean to be made in the image of God? What does it mean to be in the image of God? What does it mean to be human? What does God want us to mean to be human? Okay, that's what I had.
Thank you, Matt. We've got like 5 minutes for questions, and we'll explore some of these challenges Matt gave us. Next week, we're going to have Pastor Jason and Pastor Young-Kwan up here for Q&A, and so we'll be thinking of some questions.
I heard on the radio a week or two ago about the Billy Graham Center putting out a notice that if you're watching any Billy Graham sermons, make sure that you're watching them from the right source, because they change the sermon into something that is not what he would have said. So it's all right.
Oh yeah, that's a deep fake.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know about that one, but they're already having a warning. That's interesting.
Other comments, questions? Yes?
Sorry, I feel my heart kind of fluttering a lot. There's a lot of these warnings, and I guess I just want to read some scripture.
All right.
Anyways, this is from Hebrews 1. But of the Son, he says, the Lord says about Christ, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. And you, Lord, laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like a garment. Like a robe, you will roll them up. Like a garment, they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years will have no end.
Thank you, Marco. That's a great comment. We talked about this a little bit the first week when we were presenting some of these challenges and said, we know the end of the story, right? We've got an eschatology that tells us Jesus is going to return and set up his eternal kingdom, and he's not coming back to rule over a bunch of machines. So great scripture. Thank you for sharing that.
You mentioned that we should revisit the idea of Sabbath. Can you expand on that a little?
So I'm not that good at the Sabbath. I mean, software engineers are known for working night and day and being caffeineaholics. So that's something I've tried to learn a little bit more about more recently on the idea of rest and balancing that out. But I also am really concerned about the total lack of work. There are a lot of people now who, a lot of my students, watching Netflix and video games 100%, and then expecting to rest like, well, you've been kind of resting the whole time. So I believe it's both. And so I think I just think when I say refocus, like, oh, that's me, I'm kind of preaching to myself that I need to understand what does it really mean now. Okay, for a lot of things, even in public policy, things that were probably the right answer 10 years ago may not be the right answer. So our understanding of Sabbath that may have satisfied the Industrial Revolution might need to be re-explored to make sure we're still applying it correctly. So I think that's one thing. It's disruptive. Things have changed. So we need to revisit some things. So I think in the Industrial Revolution, we lost sight of the Sabbath and we pushed back and say, we can't work every day. That's not how it's supposed to work. I think now we have a problem where people may not work at all, or they will always be connected 24/7. So one thing I try to do is Sunday morning, and I try not to do much digital work between like noon on Saturday to noon on Sunday. And my wife and I even go to a coffee shop before church, and I bring a paper book. not digital, and try to pull back a little bit. And I think digital Sabbath is a small part of it. And hopefully it'll be longer over time and I'll learn to do that. But that's more of a confession probably than anything else.
All right. I think we're just about out of time here. So, hey, come back next week. We're going to have a couple of our pastors up there. We can ask some questions. But really appreciate your engagement. Let's get
Thank you.